Now, the Prime Minister has been criticised for inviting Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince for an official visit to the UK. The trip by Mohammed bin Salman would be the first in 5 years amid criticism of the country's human rights record and lingering questions over its involvement in the murder of Washington Post reporter Jamal Khashoggi. Well, the UK government says Rishi Sunak and the Crown Prince want to take forward UK-Saudi cooperation. Let's speak to the Liberal Democrat MP Christine Jordan and Salman Al-Ansari, who's a geopolitical researcher in Riyadh. Firstly, Christine, your party is against this visit going ahead. Why is that?
My party is against giving Saudi Arabia the false impression that, well, at least I would hope it would be a false impression, that we find human rights abuses acceptable, that they can continue in any country, and that this government will not take any action or recommend others to take any action against them to change it by welcoming, throwing open the red carpet to MBS. This, to me, sends the wrong, and to my party, sends the wrong message to Saudi Arabia that human rights abuses are not acceptable, and their activities in Yemen and the war in Yemen have not been acceptable. And it's we have to stand up and speak out for these things.
Salman, what do you make of this potential visit then?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I think the two kingdoms, Saudi Arabia and the UK, have a historic and strong relations. Both countries are, I believe, indispensable to each other. The overall trade volume exceeds $21 billion, which witnessed the biggest increase last year, around 80% compared to the data of 2021. And also the Financial Times last month quoted a British official who said it explicitly that we need Saudi Arabia more than they need us. But I believe actually we both need each other. And I think Saudi Arabia is witnessing a historic transformation in its economy and society. Riyadh used to rely on oil. 92% of its income comes from oil in 2016. Now in 2023, the percentage got reduced to 57%. This considered to be like a big achievement within 7 years. And I think the UK's economy is a good model since it heavily relies on services, the services sector. So the Saudis can collaborate with the UK at a big level. But with regards to the human rights, etc., I think facts are stubborn things. Saudi Arabia was ranked #1 in the world in Government Trust Index, according to Ipsos, and the biggest reformer in the world in the field of women's rights by the World Bank in 2020, after the kingdom enacted 60 new laws in favor of women. And I believe some in the UK and the West at large are in deep denial of the status of their communities, human rights issues, reverse racism, culture war, homelessness, drug addiction, violence, etc. And I don't think the Saudis or any other country are actually pointing fingers at them, because it's not our nature of doing things. And the method they used in the West is only pointing fingers at other countries and blaming them for human rights violations. I think no one in our world or in our part of the world take these angry statements seriously. And the Saudis should care less about those who have inferiority complex and jealousy.
Well, Christine, what do you make about the points that Salman was making there, that this is a territory which is working to pass new laws to deal with human rights issues, and also that maybe sometimes governments have to act pragmatically when dealing with other countries?
Well, if Saudi Arabia is acting to improve things, then that is something which we should continue to strive to influence and to encourage. But I don't think rolling out the red carpet for Mohammed bin Salman is the way to do it. Your other guest said there that, that this country and Saudi Arabia depend on one another. And if Saudi Arabia is dependent on the trade, or trade with the UK is important to Saudi Arabia, then we have to take this opportunity to stand up and say that we do not support human rights violations. And also, there are still questions to be asked about the brutal murder of Jamal Khashoggi, which took place, which horrified everybody in this country, and in which the regime is alleged to have been complicit. Now, it sends the wrong signal if we continue acting in this way. It tells regimes that they can act with impunity. and that we and our allies will do nothing about it. And if there have been changes in Saudi Arabia, it may be because we have been saying, and we have to continue to say, that human rights abuses against the LGBT community, against women, are not acceptable, and that the activity in the war in Yemen, is not acceptable. And we have to make that point as loudly and as strongly as we can at every opportunity.
And Salman, it's not just the Liberal Democrats that are worried about this. We've got human rights groups like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch as well. As they say there are really egregious human rights abuses going on in Saudi Arabia, people being locked up for decades, sometimes without trial, just for things that they write on social media. So, I mean, why should the UK deal with Saudi Arabia?
It's interesting seeing these statements, to be honest. Like we've seen in the media, specifically the British media, they were speaking about sports washing, greenwashing, washing. So I think the British media should actually grow up. The Saudis care about...
So everyone's wrong then, that everything's absolutely fine in Saudi Arabia?
Absolutely. And at the same time, no country is perfect. And I'm saying this. And the Saudis care about reforming their country for themselves and not to appease the East or the West. And I think they need to get over the whole thing about like just having the criticism of Saudi Arabia to be a trendy thing. And to not make a fool of yourself by claiming the high moral stance to hide your insecurity. And I believe genuinely that the Arabs of the same land of Saudi Arabia helped Europe and the UK throughout history by their scientific achievements in math, astronomy, medicine throughout the last millennium. And the British people helped the whole world by the Industrial Revolution 200 years ago. So let's replicate that legacy for the sake of humanity and stop this narcissistic and resentful statements that do not help neither the people of the UK nor Saudi Arabia. The Saudi-British relations are an important one for security, for regional security, for global security, and for global economic prosperity.
Well, Christine, you've just been accused of narcissistic behaviour and saying something just because it's trendy. But Labour say that there should be a dialogue with Saudi Arabia, and that should include talk of human rights. Is that a more pragmatic approach, do you think, to diplomacy?
I think all conversations with Saudi Arabia should include talk of human rights, and to regard taking human rights seriously and being concerned about LGBT rights, about people, as you say, being arrested and held, about countries not following international standards. This is not about the United Kingdom. This is about international standards, about how people are treated, and to call that trendy, I think, is not really reflecting what we in this country believe. We believe that human rights are fundamental to a nation's well-being and to people's well-being and to the rights of people. It's never been trendy. And I think that, on this one thing, I would agree with the Labour Party that we should always raise these issues, not just with Saudi Arabia, but with every country. And yes, we always have to have regard in this country to the fact that we can sometimes overlook possibilities. We should be looking all the time to ensure that we don't fall down on human rights protections, but that does not mean that we should allow it to go, abuses to go unchallenged elsewhere in the world. Because if it goes unchallenged anywhere in the world, then it's a threat to all of us.
OK, thank you both for joining us this morning. That's the Liberal Democrat MP Christine Jardine and Salman Al-Ansari, who's a geopolitical researcher based in Riyadh.
Let's get the headlines now at 7:45.